Hello and welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather this Saturday, 28th of July, 2018. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service. No watches, warnings, or advisories out for the state for the next day or so. So we'll just jump into the fire danger graphic here. A lot less. These areas have diminished with the moisture and clouds and some rain that moved into the area. One location up there toward the upper Yukon Valley, or actually just to the south of the flats there, picked up 1/4 of an inch of rain during the day today. Otherwise, still pretty high, but not as bad as it was yesterday here from the central Tanana Valley. Still a couple of extreme areas there, north side of the Alaska Range, and some extreme fire danger there in the Copper River Basin area, and a little bit of high fire danger here right out there along the lower Yukon River Valley area to almost into the delta there, edges way up into that category during the day today. And satellite imagery showing some moisture had gotten up into the northeast interior here, but not too bad today, just some isolated thunderstorms developing, mostly along the southern slopes of the Brooks Range there, or just south of this solid band of moisture from about the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast, where rain fell there, mostly heaviest over the central and east side of those areas. And we have moisture here, a band dissipating, but continued to move northward in southerly flow. And that brought light rain and cloudy skies, obviously, here across the North Gulf Coast, Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, and even into Anchorage during mid-afternoon today. And that extends back out to the southwest here with a larger area of clouds over the southwest, but rainfall amounts quite light into Bristol Bay. And yet another developing front back out here to the west with a little bit stronger low pressure center associated with it. That brought nearly an inch of rain to Adak during the last 24 hours. And that front spreading moisture in as it begins to affect the Nikolsky area. Otherwise, the interior here, not too bad with some sunshine today and light winds, and another nice day, dry day along the southeast coast. On the chart, there's some low clouds with fog here hugging the coastline of the Panhandle, tending to pull back into the afternoon daytime hours and then tends to increase and push inland into the inside waters, western areas. And that's been going on for several days, and really not a big change coming up for tonight and tomorrow. Otherwise, interior variably cloudy, some sunshine, also scattered thunderstorms developing at mid-afternoon in these locations, and showers up into the Brooks Range. And then that boundary there keeping rainfall occurring over the central eastern Arctic coast areas into the North Slope, with Barrow picking up about 1/3 of an inch of rain today, while the North Slope had up to 2/10 of an inch precipitation there. And then this system keeping it breezy along the southwest coast, southeast winds, Cape Newenham, Nunavak Island, 15-25 miles an hour, maybe some higher gusts, and the areas of light rain along the North Gulf Coast. Back to the southwest, Alaska Peninsula, anywhere from 1 to 3/10 falling during the day today with that southerly flow associated with this front. And then a developing front farther back to the west there, all kind of connected to the same low center now. But we'll see this original front dissipates tonight, starts to get absorbed as the next one here begins to become the dominant feature. So it'll be quite windy and definitely staying wet with periods of rain and fog for the Alaska Peninsula up into the Pribilof Islands. And that condition, except the winds will become northerly on the backside of that low center, anywhere from 15 to 30 miles an hour across Adak and Atka, with light rain, showers, and fog continuing, but that'll end and improve out toward Shimei and Attu. Interior, variably to mostly cloudy to partly cloudy, depending on where you are, with diminishing shower activity. Thunderstorms, what does develop will end. Rain begins to end over the North Slope and push off to the east, so it'll be drier conditions tonight. Look for low clouds, possible fog in the Chukchi Sea, of course, through the strait to St. Lawrence Island. That condition possible anywhere in the Bering Sea, outside of the rather large rain shield. And no change here for the Panhandle. Low clouds move inland a little bit tonight with high pressure ridging staying off the coast there. And that'll continue to funnel northward, narrow and continuing to weaken band of moisture, keeping it damp and unsettled for the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, Showers probably diminishing over the Cook Inlet area, with also diminishing showers along the Alaska Range. And looking into tomorrow, we'll see that southeast coast, again, a day much like the last several there. Otherwise, mostly cloudy, scattered showers, maybe some sun breaks for south central Alaska. And Kodiak Island, kind of a weak trough, keeps it damp there. But the interior looking pretty good with a little more sunshine, a lot less precipitation what you saw today or over the last 24 hours there. Even the Arctic coast should be dry. Look for some patchy fog on the east side. And this low center spins up, that front comes in. So small craft advisories, rain continue the Alaska Peninsula, staying quite breezy with periods of rain along the southwest coast here. And lots of showers back to the west, again diminishing as you head on out toward the western Aleutians. Outlook for Monday, basically dry here over the interior. Isolated thunderstorms possibly over the Wrangell Mountains. Very isolated, maybe a little more scattered nature up toward the Eagle area over toward the border, and even over the eastern Brooks Range area, and then on into the Yukon. But partly sunny for the North Gulf Coast areas, mostly cloudy the way it looks right now for south central Alaska, with some showers along the Kenai Peninsula and back along the Alaska Range southward. A little more numerous Kodiak Island and eastern Bristol Bay and across the Alaska Peninsula. Kind of an old boundary there. That front weakens and kind of really dissipates back up here to the north. And with the continued south flow around this ridge over the Gulf of Alaska, that'll keep it mostly cloudy south central Alaska. Stays wet over the Pribilof, so that weakening low, but a band of moisture extending from St. George, St. Paul down into the central Aleutian areas. And basically dry, maybe a few more clouds, an increase in the clouds over the southeast coast, and that's about it as far as any changes go. Still dry. And lows for tonight, as warm as the mid-60s over the southern areas there, and upper 50s to the north. 55 to 60 central interior, 40s Arctic coast up Kaktovik down to 37, and 40s in the Bering Sea for the highs tomorrow. Looks very nice here with more sunshine, less precipitation, even the North Slope into the 70s, and lower 80s, lower to mid 80s possibly here over the eastern interior, 70s all the way back to the Seward Peninsula into the Kuskokwim Valley, 60s south central Alaska with 50s Kodiak Island and the southeast coast. Not too bad, pushing up toward 80 again down south, and 70s all the way up to Skagway, high 60s and near 70 out along the coast in the afternoon. And for the lows, 55 to 60 for the Panhandle, and upper 50s now for the upper Yukon Valley, but lower 60s all the way back toward Kotzebue, 40s Arctic coast, 40s mid to upper in the Aleutians, and for the highs, back into the 80s here, 80 to 85, eastern interior, near 80 around the greater Fairbanks area, well into the 70s on the north slope there, but 50s along the Arctic coast, and 70s again, lower 70s back into the Kuskokwim Valley, with temperatures near 60 along the southwest coast, otherwise 50s for the Aleutians and the Bering Sea area around the Pribilof. A little cooler, 48 for the high there at around St. Lawrence Island. Otherwise, lower 60s for the western Arctic coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to flying weather. Big area IFR, central Bering Sea, marginal up to the coast. IFR here over the Auckland Mountains, Kilbrook area, and IFR just south of the western Aleutians there. Big zone IFR here, Gulf of Alaska up into Prince William Sound, and then down and along, hugging the coast, especially Prince of Wales Island. Up Arctic coast, mainly central east side, just getting in touch with some IFR. VFR in the interior in the afternoon, VFR in the interior, and improving, especially on the western Arctic coast, across the Noatak Valley there to Kivalina, Kotzebue, and Selawik. Marginal VFR from about Nome on out to the Bering Strait to St. Lawrence Island. Then you pick up the IFR, Nunivak Island, on down toward Adak and Atka, IFR, southern Kodiak Island, and retreating a little bit to the west off the southeast coast. No change here for the Alaska Peninsula for from Sunday afternoon to Friday morning, and then marginal VFR from Kodiak Island up across Kamishak Bay and the Alaska Range there northward, but kind of iffy up in this area. Anyway, VFR in the interior, Copper River Basin, marginal along the Arctic coast. And for Monday afternoon, going VFR, possibly for the entire Arctic coast, except maybe Point Barrow, and then over toward Cape Lisburne and Point Hope and Kivalina, marginal to IFR, but good VFR in the interior, some lingering marginal VFR. That's on the western slopes of the Alaska Range, on the eastern slopes of the Alaska Range there. That's about it. That gets a little more widespread down toward Kodiak. Areas IFR along the southwest coast, Bering Sea, IFR. Fox Islands could be some marginal VFR in the afternoon. And then the IFR all offshore of the North Gulf Coast, as well as the Panhandle. And for Anaktuvuk, both Anaktuvuk and Adigan will be VFR tomorrow, as well as Lake Clark and Merrill, except look for marginal VFR possibly on both eastern entrances. Windy though, or I'm sorry, rainy VFR, windy also VFR. And Isabel, marginal becoming VFR. Mintesta, good VFR tomorrow, as well as Tanita VFR. And Portage, step out of the way. Starting out IFR, look for a gradual improvement, hopefully to marginal VFR, if not better, into the late afternoon. And for Chilkoot and White, another VFR day. Freezing levels, upper high pressure basically still in control of the Panhandle, 14,000 feet there, Dixon entrance to Queen Charlotte's, 12,000 up to just west of Yakutat, and then about 10,000 here through the interior areas, 8,000 feet northern Bering Sea with that cooler upper level trough here down to the Aleutians, then 12,000 of the Fox Islands. Icing above 8,000 feet until you'll be cold enough to experience icing. Occasional considerable moderate here just southwest of Nunivak Island, back down maybe the Perbeloff's in that zone, but again you got to be up around 8,000 feet. Otherwise Atka over to possibly Falls Pass there, could see some isolated moderate rime, very isolated, mostly just areas of light rime icing. And that's about it as far as icing goes in the state. So the upper level windfold chart, high pressure here over the Gulf of Alaska. And again, that's keeping the warm air aloft in over the southeast coast and also much of the interior, with the trough out here to the west, and really not too strong on the jet streams now. About 100 knots on the southwest side of that low, but that's well south of the Aleutians. 9,000 feet, different story. South to southeast, 40 to 50 knots. Eastern Aleutians, western Alaska Peninsula, even up to 35 there. Say Cape Nuanam across the Aleutian Range. 30 knots Kamishak Bay, quite light here over the central and southeast interior. 15 to 20 eastern or up north slope to the eastern Arctic coast, but windier on the western coast. And the Panhandle 5 to 15 out of the northwest. But at 3,000 feet, those winds will be considerably stronger along the central and south coasts. They're at about 25 knots, but light from the northern Panhandle right in the central interior areas. And south-southeast, 40 knotters here from the eastern Aleutians right across the Alaska Peninsula, and 25 to 30 here across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, with 40 knots for the Fox Islands, northerlies on the other side at about 20 to 30 knots. And turbulence-wise, look for occasional moderate chop here in the lee side of the Alaska Peninsula. Also from Bristol Bay right up the coastline to Nunivak Island. Could be, those will be the bumpiest places during the day tomorrow. And after the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. As you well know, you can get forecast information for any day of the week. Today, tonight, tomorrow, out to 6 or 7 days. It includes the high and low temperature, the wind direction, the chance of rain or snow in your part of Alaska. But did you know that there is information available to forecast out to 2 weeks? So the question is, how would you use that information? And here to answer that question today and tell us a lot more about climate services from the U.S. National Weather Service Alaska region is Rick Toman. He's the program manager for the Climate Science and Services. And Rick, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
How would we use information that is out to 2 weeks instead of just the high and low and the chance of rain?
Well, Dave, as we move out in time, of course, forecasts become more uncertain. So as we move into that second week from now, we're not looking at specific highs or lows or precipitation amounts at any given place. What we can do with the state of the science at this point is get a handle on patterns. So we can say things like increased chances for stormy weather in the Bering Sea in 2 weeks. Or we've been in a cold weather pattern, looks like 8 to 10 days from now, that pattern's going to change. Those are the kind of forecasts that we can currently make in that second week.
So you're increasing lead time for perhaps big or small weather events and telling us the likelihood of maybe more coastal storms or wind events in some areas?
Those are the kinds of things that that we hope to be able to let Alaskans know in the second week forecast. And if you have an activity or an event that you would find that kind of advance notice useful, whether it's moving stuff off of the beach, whether to go out hunting or to come back from camp, those kind of decisions, the week 2 provides the opportunity for you to get a handle on that kind of information.
Okay. What other type of weather impacts that we're familiar with might Alaskans use climate services for?
Well, in the forecast realm, we can go provide some information from this week 2, say the 8 to 14 day period, on out to the monthly and even seasonal time scale. Now, those monthly seasonal forecasts are still kind of just really very much pattern dependent, and the amount of detail that we can provide at this point is still pretty limited. Generally, indications of how temperature and precipitation will fall in maybe above normal, below normal kind of range. But in the week 2 period, we can be considerably more specific than that as far as the general patterns and really the impacts on Alaskans.
Okay, so we would be talking about generalizations there that would tell us that the period might be more stormy, might be more hot, more dry, more cold, and situations like that.
That's correct. So we're not going to be able to say in which community, for instance, there's the threat of coastal flooding, but we can often be able to tell we're moving into a pattern that would be conducive to big Bering Sea storms. So if you're in an area that could potentially impact you, you'll want to pay attention to the weather forecast.
Okay. Now, every day and every hour of the day, the National Weather Service is working on a forecast for the next day. But how do you start your forecast process for that extended period that goes out beyond 7 days?
Well, the way things work right now, we start off with the expected general flow pattern for Alaska and the whole world, really, and then we narrow that down to Alaska. So we start off with the basic computer model forecast. There's quite a few different computer models that we look at, bring those together. And then another important part of that is we attempt to assess the confidence. The reality is often 2 weeks away, the computer models are very divergent. They have lots of different solutions, and that's an indication that we don't have much confidence. But when we see more agreement in that time frame, and when that agreement is a pattern that will be potentially very impactful for Alaska or is a big change from what we've been in, that's when we can then take that expected pattern. We have computer models forecasting it. We've assessed the confidence. Now we can move that forward. How, using our experience as Alaskan weather forecasters, how does that typically play out for Alaska? So is this a stormy pattern for the Bering Sea? Is this an extra rainy period for Southeast? Is this the kind of pattern that generates strong winds potentially in the Anchorage Bowl? Is this a deep cold pattern for the interior? All of those are the kind of things that we're looking at in these large-scale patterns. That's very different than telling you that the winds on 10 days from now are going to be gusting to 120 on the hillside. We're looking for patterns, not the very specific information that the Weather Service will then hone in on as the event gets closer.
So the idea is to keep the 5, 6, 7 day forecast the same, where you are getting the standard high and low temperature and the chance of wind or rain, but further out you get a broad general forecast, but as the time gets closer to that event, we'll get a lot more specific.
That's correct.
Okay, very good. So how can people use this information if I am out in the bush and I want to see, is a coastal storm expected in my region, or is a chance for that improving over the next 2 to 3 weeks? Where could I go to get information like that?
When we see that potentially impactful or a big change in the weather is coming 8 to 14 days out, typically we will start to highlight that on the Weather Service Facebook site. We might produce a YouTube video highlighting that, linking that on our Facebook site. So often at this point, we don't have much to say in that because we're really looking for those forecasts of opportunities. But one thing we can say very likely as we go through the next 2 or 3 years, there'll be more and more of this kind of forecast information available in that week 2 time frame.
Okay, and something that emergency managers and city planners and folks in villages might be interested in keeping an eye out for, looking for that information to be headlined, whether that's on social media or perhaps through the National Weather Service channels there to get information from you to make better plans a little bit longer term and make better preparations in the event that things become a little bit more unsettled.
Absolutely. Climate Services with the National Weather Service Alaska region is talking to the state of Alaska every week, apprising them of that 2-week outlook. And on the social media side, we are working to keep Alaskans informed so that when we think we have some confidence in a high impact or a big change, that's the best way right now for folks to find out about that. Twitter, Facebook, so stay tuned to your National Weather Service.
Very good, a developing program. Rick Thoman with the National Weather Service Alaska region. He's a Climate Science and Services Program Manager. Thanks so much for joining us again, Rick, and I hope to have you back again soon.
Great, thanks Dave.
For another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Sea ice, big changes, or the areas of changes occurring up in the ice pack. We're thinning out a little more rapidly. We still have this heavier area, multi-year ice, not expected to change much here. It's lying from the eastern coast there up through here, and then breaking up a little bit between heavier ice to the north of that. And ice edge out here may expand northward over the next 4 or 5 days, anywhere from 10 to 20 nautical miles. Otherwise, no big changes expected. On to the coastal water forecast here. Small craft advisories for northwest winds 25 to 30 knots along much of the outer coastline. Extreme north coast west of 15, with seas 4 feet there to as high as 7 feet south, and light southerlies at about 15 Lynn Canal, northwest 15 for Stevens Passage, and 20 knots for Clarence Strait. Those will drop off to about 15, but hold northwesterly direction there for Clarence Strait. Light northwest winds for Stevens Passage, south 15 Lynn Canal. And small craft advisories continue here along the central and south coast, 25 knots to 30 knots now with 7 to 9 foot seas, and west 20 for the north side. Prince William Sound east 15 tomorrow, otherwise variable at 10 for the North Gulf Coast, so seas 5 feet. And southeast 20 for the Barren Islands. Small craft advisories for Kamishak Bay. East winds 25 knots with 5 foot seas. Northeast at 10 with 2 foot seas for Cook Inlet. And on to Monday, Prince William Sound, light west winds, 2 foot seas. Northeast at 10 for Cook Inlet. Westerlies 10 to 15 for the North Gulf Coast. And we've got southeast winds of 15 for the Barren Islands and southeast 20 for the Kamishak Bay area. And for Kodiak Island, southeast 20 on the east side, otherwise 15 for Shelikof Strait. Small craft advisories there from Sitkinak to Cape Saratchev. In fact, the Alaska Peninsula southeast 30 knots and 30 knots also for Bristol Bay with 7 foot seas. And for Monday, southerly small craft advisories 25 to 30 knots for the peninsula, seas as high as 11 feet. Southeast 20 for Bristol Bay with 5 foot seas and 20 knot winds, but seas at 10 feet here up to Sitkinak. 15 knot winds from the south-southeast for Kodiak Island with 3 to 7 foot seas. Small craft advisories for the central and western Aleutians, northwest 25 to 30 for those western zones, 7 to 10 foot seas, and west-northwest 25 to 35 here for the Adak-Atka area. The seas as high as 12 feet in the Pacific side and as high as 14 to 15 feet here south of the Fox Islands with 30 knot southerly winds, north side southeast 20 to 30. And then for Monday there, we've got now some gales in the forecast with that next front. Southwest behind it at about 30 knots, but along and ahead of the front, southerlies 30 to 35 knots. seas up to 13 feet. And the central Aleutian small craft advisories, west-southwest 25 to 30, become west 25 and then become northwest and fall down to about 20 knots with 8-foot seas for the far western zone. Pribilof Islands, east 30 knots tomorrow, seas 10 feet. We've got gales here, south of Nunivak Island, 35 knots with 10-foot seas, east 30 knots there on the north side of the island, coming back around to northeast at the same speed. St. Matthew Island, St. Lawrence Island, east of 15. Yeah, that's Norton Sound with east of 15. St. Lawrence Island, 20 knots. And then for Monday, both of those zones southeast at 20, so it makes it easy. 4 to 6 foot seas, small craft advisories, pretty good southeast wind to 30 knots for the entire southwest coast zones there. 10-foot seas, south 30 for the Pribilofs, seas 13 feet. Small craft advisories for St. Matthew Island and the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Light winds at 10, southeast or southwest at 20 for the central coast, all the way down to Cape Beaufort. Then they turn southerly at 20 knots and drop off to 10 knots there in the Chukchi Sea. And those will come up a tad to 15 knots still from the same direction on Monday. And south becomes southwest 20 here all the way to the central coast. Heading east, they diminish to 15 knots and then become southerly toward demarcation point. For tonight, periods of rain continue with this persistent boundary, but it'll decrease over south central Alaska from Cook Inlet eastward, definitely drying out over the northern interior. Next system, wind and rain with it. Eastern Aleutians of the Alaska Peninsula tomorrow pushes up to the southwest coast, and drier and warmer over interior Alaska. Still nice over the Panhandle, again pushing up near 80 degrees. And basically the same, maybe a few more clouds on the next day, Monday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.